his legacy is living on through us, through his kids, through all the people carrying and sharing these stories and just buckling down and advocating and protesting and just taking a stand against things that have been wrong for a long time because of this one man.
Yeah.
And then it started making us look back and be like, oh, there's not just one man. He's on a list of a lot of people.
What up? It's Dramos, and this is the recap, of course, as I do each and every week, breaking down some of the biggest headlines from this last week. Now, my guest today helping me break it all down is Family. She is a part of the LATV family as one of the hosts of the show Shades of Beauty. She's also the author of the new book, Café Con Leche. Yoey Apolinario will be hopping on in just a little bit to help me break down some of these headlines. But first, man, y'all already know what time it is. Let's get to some of the BS from this last week. Now, something near and dear to my heart is the student loan debt crisis. And as someone myself who has student loans and, man, drank the juice that I was fed from a very young age that the only way to be successful in this country is to go to college, right? I drank that juice. I went there. I went down that path. You know, we were promised that college would give us a nice job, the white picket fence, the whole American dream, right? All of that nonsense. And the reality is that most people of my generation and younger have had to come face to face with the sad realization that they were fed a lie. Now, the sad reality is that only 27% of college graduates have a job related to their major. And some 43.7% of recent graduates, those ages 22 to 27 with a bachelor's degree or higher, are underemployed. And this is according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York's labor market for recent college graduates, meaning they should be getting paid more money based upon their degree and the time that they spent in school. And there's also all kinds of beautiful stats that continue to make my point about the racket that is college. They also go on to say the average cost of college has more than doubled in the 21st century with an annual growth rate of 6.8%. And considering loss of income from not being able to work while in school, and then the loan interest that happens when you are paying back your student loans, the ultimate price of the average bachelor's degree in this country may be, and please, brace yourself for this number, the cost of it at the end of the day may be as high as $400,000. Yes, almost $500,000 to get a piece of paper that doesn't even really grant you the guarantee of a job. So I think most of us can honestly say that, if we're being honest, for most people, college has turned out to be a bit of a racket. It's a place where you're asked to pay for prerequisite classes like gym or health, or even worse, have to pay to earn credits for an unpaid internship you're working. Yes, you're literally paying to work. I don't get it either, but that's the sad norm in our college system. And on top of college itself being a racket, let's look at the lenders, because that's what we're going to be talking about today. The lenders, one of the top lenders in this country, Navient, has had multiple lawsuits brought up against it recently, and several, in fact, and involving states, right? You have several states that are suing Navient, and they're citing unfair lending practices, deception, and mismanagement of loan products. And some of these lawsuits have actually been settled. And in these recent settlements, Navient will have to cancel the remaining balance on $1.7 billion in subprime private student loan balances. Over $1 billion they will have to cancel out because of their predatory practices. I don't know about you, but it seems to me like there's a pretty obvious problem here on all fronts. And with that problem in mind, it's obvious that it also needs to be dealt with right away before it continues to destroy the lives of young people in this country. And as much criticism as our president has rightfully taken for dragging his elderly feet on this, it finally seems like we may have some progress on this. Now, according to NBC News, in a meeting this last week with Congressional Hispanic Caucus members, Biden was asked by Representative Tony Cardenas of California to extend the moratorium on federal loan payments and cancel $10,000 per borrower in student loan debt. And two sources familiar with the meeting told NBC News that he was receptive to both requests. The president was receptive to the idea of not only extending the moratorium for federal student loan payments, but also canceling $10,000 per borrower in student loan debt. Now, one congressional aide familiar with the meeting went on to also say that Biden left members with the understanding that he's leaning towards some forgiveness of student loan debt. And man, it seems like this could not have come at a better time, as inflation is just wreaking havoc on working families. It's said that despite higher wages now in this country, inflation actually gave the average worker in this country a 2.4% pay cut this last year. Inflation grew 7% in December from the year earlier. And this is all, of course, statistically available for you online. It's according to the U.S. Department of Labor. And they're saying average hourly wages also increased in this country over the last year by 4.7%. And that amounts to still a cut of more than 2% on average of their pay because of inflation. And just for the record, because I can already hear the little comments, I hear Twitter fingers going, I know a lot of people are going to blame this inflation on the wage increases and Joe Biden as a result. And just for the record, because I know I'm going to be seeing a lot of the comments, you get little Twitter fingers ready. I know a lot of people are blaming the inflation on the wage increases and Joe Biden did this, Joe Biden didn't do that. But let's talk about what actually happens with inflation when you talk about these wage increases, right? So wage increases cause inflation because the cost of producing goods and services now goes up for a company, right? And now these companies must charge more for their goods and services to maintain the same level of profitability. Listen to those words right there. We're not talking about being able to maintain a profit, not even saying being able to maintain a healthy profit. They're trying to maintain the same exact profitability. So these greedy companies and their CEOs refuse to truly make things fair. And instead of maybe having to pay for the lifestyle of one less mistress, these greedy CEOs have decided to, you know what? No, let's just pass the buck on to the working people, us, the consumers. And that's what they think is fair, even though they have these overinflated salaries and their workers are struggling to make ends meet. Now, anybody who exists here in the real world can see that this is a major crisis and is affecting people's opportunities to a life without struggle. Like, people are genuinely just trying to make ends meet and live a comfortable life here in this country. And it's pretty easy to recognize that this is, in fact, a major crisis. Now, notice I said for anybody living in the real world, because sadly for our country, much of the Republican Party lives in, I guess, the twilight zone, right? Because you have crazy people doing crazy things right now. Take this, for example. As this loan forgiveness conversation has been coming out, you now have a group of Republicans led by Senate Minority Whip Thune, great name, terrible person, and he's introducing a bill to prevent Biden from canceling student loan debt, according to legislative text that was obtained by NBC News. Now, this bill is called the Stop Reckless Student Loan Actions Act of 2022, real creative on the title, and it states that the executive branch has, quote, abused its authority to pause student loan payments during the COVID pandemic. Right. Because people's lives being uprooted for over a year should just be ignored, right? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Why would we want to help people out who have just had everything taken away from them that they've known for an entire year and are now trying to rebuild and bounce back, right? let's make them have to pay their stupid student loans on top of all that. Makes perfect sense, right? Now, Thune introduced the bill with Senators Bill Cassidy, as well as Richard Burr and Mike Braun, additionally with Roger Marshall of Kansas. And in an interview, Mike Braun, to be specific, he says that he opposes student debt forgiveness on the merits that he fears it would add to the national debt, and he argues that it would benefit families who can afford to pay down the loans. So his point is we should allow this crisis to continue because some people are lucky enough to afford their loans. Okay, so anybody who's not has to suffer because of that. How does make it make sense? Somebody, I mean, once again, the Republicans are just flat out telling you they do not give a damn about the everyday person struggling day to day, just as long as it doesn't disturb them over there in the Twilight Zone. Now, with that said, let me bring on my guest today to lighten things up just a little bit. She is the host of our very own LATV's Shades of Beauty. She is family, as well as the author of the new book, Café Con Leche. Yo, Apolinario, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I mean, I'm excited to talk to you for so many reasons, aside from the fact that we are LATV family, but gang. But, you know, I also have been seeing your book pop up a whole bunch, like randomly on my timeline, which is really cool to kind of like, you know, the synergy and all of that, right? I didn't even kind of wasn't too familiar because I know your show was kind of new. And then seeing that, man, you are the person behind this book that I've been seeing a lot of people repost, and it's good to meet you and get to talk to you.
Oh, it's so nice to meet you and get to talk to you too. That's crazy that it's been popping up on your timeline. That's wild how that works.
Absolutely.
The algorithm.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, listen, I want to dive into the book. I want to dive into the TV show. But first, if it's cool with you, I want to kind of touch on some current events and get your thoughts on them.
All right, let's go.
Okay. So, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, you are what, half Puerto Rican, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, half Puerto Rican, half Afro-Colombian.
Beautiful. So, I mean, let's talk a bit about Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico was in the news this last week when you had the Supreme Court denying an effort that was made to require Social Security benefits to go to the people of Puerto Rico. And this was an 8-1 decision. The lone person who sat out on this one, the lone dissenter, was Justice Sonia Sotomayor. And basically, this keeps Puerto Rican residents from receiving the benefits that every other American in this country gets, which is things like supplemental security income for the elderly, blind and disabled individuals. And this is an act that, again, you know, these benefits were made to go to U.S. citizens, which Puerto Ricans are. Yeah. And for anybody who has some sort of pushback on this, I know that there's also a lot of talk that, you know, Puerto Rico doesn't contribute when it comes to federal taxes. But the reality is Puerto Rico is exempt from federal income tax, but they do pay federal taxes for things like Social Security, Medicare, and unemployment taxes. So, man, I know as a Puerto Rican, as a Latino, as a human being, for me, this was really kind of heartbreaking and really frustrating to see. I mean, I'd love to kind of hear your take and your thoughts on it.
I mean, it's definitely heartbreaking. My family is very fresh from the island. I'm first generation. So when I talk to my family back home, a lot of the things we're talking about is retiring on the island or returning to the island or going to be with the family that we have left there. And I feel like now those plans kind of have to be redirected and thought out again because of stuff like this. And I'm like, how does that affect people who were born and raised on the island, went back to the mainland, and then decided to go back? What does that mean for them? What does it mean for my family that was on the island, never left? I don't know. It puts things in another perspective. It makes things a little more difficult, more than they already were.
Right. And to me, it also just continues to point out this like glaring fact that we've all known, but a lot of people try and deny. And it's that the United States will never see us as equals, right? They will never, they don't want to see us as equals. They don't see any benefit in it. And things like this, I mean, Hurricane Maria, the lack of support, all of the above, right, continues to do so. But you still have people, even on the island, who like have this idea of the great white savior, right? America coming to save them, and statehood being the answer, and all these things. And it's like, bro, they're showing you their hand. Like, they don't give a damn about you or your well-being. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy to me.
Yeah, they don't give a damn. And I don't know, I'm like, why don't we learn, but the US has shown us, like, through history, you go back, the proof is in the pudding. They're not coming to save us. But they will come by and buy up all the land from the Puerto Ricans.
Right.
So they won't save us, but they'll use us for their tourism.
Absolutely. And then the local government, you know, will again do whatever they can to bring more white people to the island, essentially, because that is money in their pocket. They'll sell the souls of the very citizens who they're supposed to be looking after. You know, it's a really, just tragic situation.
It really is. And it is tough because I'm like, I wouldn't even trust statehood being the answer.
Right.
Based on the relationship with the US that we've had in the past.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a very frustrating place to kind of be. You have on one hand, like, the local government, which you feel like you can't really trust all that much. But then at the same time, the U.S. has shown you that you can't trust them, you know. So it's definitely a really difficult, time period for Puerto Rico. And I think things like this are proving that at the end of the day, a decision has to be made in one way or the other, you know. We can't keep being in this limbo state where we're getting certain things but not getting others. You know, it just doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, I entirely agree. It definitely feels like we've been in a state of limbo for years.
Right.
Oh no. I think we got to stand on our own 2 feet. I don't know.
I agree. I think that's the answer, and we definitely can do it. I mean, and let's kind of move to another story here in the States that kind of proves my point, almost how I started, about never being seen as equals. Now, there was these students in Ohio, right? These Latin students, Isabella Palma and Antonella Belcito, and they're students of New Albany, a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, and they were actually attacked by another student last week for speaking Spanish while getting off the school bus. And right. So obviously more of the same of what we know, but also it still is frustrating. And what makes it even worse is when you hear the school district reacting, or lack of. The school district has still not released a statement about the incident, but did suggest to the girl's mother that maybe they can come up with a work from home plan if she's too afraid to go back to school. So she can't go back to school. Right. Like,
what's the plan for the other girl?
Right. Exactly. And that one last stat I want to bring up, and I'd love to hear your full blown reaction, because they bring up this idea that over the past few years, hate crimes against Latinos and people of color have been rising in shocking numbers. And they're saying that in 2019 alone, there were 527 reported hate crimes against Latinos. I mean, we've seen different things, and this is just what's being reported. We all have lived experience that went unreported. I mean, man, you hear stories like this one. I mean, what do you feel?
I don't know. I feel like halfway shocked, because we live in a time where it feels, especially me living in LA, it feels so progressive. It feels so inclusive. It feels, I'm in the middle of the industry, so I'm literally watching the industry go from all white spaces to now I'm seeing Black and Latinos on Gap ads and Hollister ads, which blew my mind. So I'm like, I see the growth, but then again, you read stories like this, and I get out of the LA bubble and just go like 200 miles away elsewhere, and I sense the stillness, the lack of growth. Yeah. But I need to know what happened to the other child, and where's disciplinary action? What happened? Like,
you would think, that would be the first, to me, that should be the first thing. Like, all right, we should not let that child go back to school. You know what I'm saying? Like, why the girl who got attacked has to stay home because she's afraid of being attacked? Why not just take the person out who attacked her? It just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And I just hate when the system's faltered. Like the system you're supposed to look towards for help, like we just talked about with Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
You have to go through the chain of command. You got to go through the principal. You got to go through the school district. And if nothing happens, it's just like, okay, what are y'all for?
Right. It's frustrating because it's like nobody's here to protect us. The people who are supposed to protect us, who are getting the check, and basically with tax money, we're paying for them to have a job. They're not doing their job, right?
Yeah.
And it's frustrating also because you have a lot of white America that is in this denial, right? Like I get a lot of backlash on my podcast. I was just reading a comment today, even though I know I shouldn't, but like it was some obvious, like, some like Karen who's obviously triggered by the fact that I'm talking about the Latino experience here in the US. And her comment was like, the US is for everybody. Get over yourself. And it's like, bruh, look at cases like this one. It's not. Your experience is completely different than that of people of color in this country. Who are you to tell somebody what their lived experience is? You know what I'm saying? And like, it's just wild to me that people still try and like push this narrative of like the US being this the so-called inclusive place. And listen, obviously there is to a degree, but that don't mean that there isn't a long history and generations of hate being passed down. I mean, those kids, like, where do you think they got it from? That girl that felt comfortable enough attacking that student for hearing somebody speak Spanish. Where do you think that came from? That came
straight from the roots, straight from the trees. She's the
exactly.
Apple, like.
Yo, it's just crazy to me. Like people want to be blind, they don't want to see it. You know what I'm saying? There's like such fragility out there.
Yes, it really is, and I think that's another thing I'm like really trying to find acceptance in, just for my mental health. Like, there are people that refuse to change no matter what, and you can lay it out in front of them, logically, black and white, no gray in the middle, and they will still find a reason to be like, well, maybe she wasn't attacked for speaking Spanish. Maybe it was for. And I'm like,
right. I
don't know, man. It is frustrating.
You never hear something like this if there's a kid speaking Italian or something like, right? Like all that kind of stuff is like, oh, cool, you can speak Italian. You know what I'm saying? Like, but Spanish is obviously, because you think of immigrants and all the hatred that goes towards that, people associate it with that, and it's like, don't speak that here type of thing, and it's really, man, it's scary, it's frustrating, and I definitely agree with what you're saying about wanting to protect your own mental health, because it can be exhausting, right?
It's exhausting. Like I feel like a hamster on a wheel. Like you're just running and going and fighting, and you're like, is anything changing, or am I still in the same spot?
Right. It's so true, and it's scary to think in 2022 we still hear that, and then you still have people wanting to deny that. And at the end of the day, I think, what people who are still denying have to realize, like, this isn't a character attack on you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's the system that created the mindsets that allow things like this to happen, and that make things like this get passed down from generation to generation. And we all have cultural blind spots, right? We all have
definitely
some sort of thing that we could improve upon, that we learn from when we get out of our immediate bubble and things like that, right?
Yeah.
But like, I don't know why that's such a hard concept for like a lot of white people to wrap their brain around in this country.
I don't know. And it's more helpful when they do, because it means more from another white person to tell the mother of that child, hey, you're wrong. Where did this child get this from? It means more when it comes from your own community, when you check your own community. So I just feel like if they just like took off this like shield over their eyes for a second, like, okay, that was wrong.
Right.
Do something about it. It meant more. It sucks that it had to be this way, but it meant more when thousands of white people were at Black Lives Matter marches. The last year in the pandemic. It meant more. For them to see the police provoke peaceful protests and not just read about it and be like, that's not true. You guys were inciting violence. Like, it meant more for you to be there on the front lines and see what was happening.
I mean, because it validates the fact that there is an issue, because when you have people who aren't the ones who are being affected by it still saying this is a problem, then you're like, if any rational person has to stop for a second and be like, oh wait, maybe there is a problem, because somebody who literally has zero like skin in the game is recognizing the issue at hand, right? And that's why white allies are so important. And then also, I mean, even coming full circle to your conversation about mental health, there are just some people that you will never change, right? They've made a choice. They've drawn their line in the sand. This is what they want to choose to believe. And you know, we can't, you know, force them to drink, right? You could take a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. You just have to have some acceptance in that and allow yourself to somehow, some way also not be kind of tainted in like a cynical way towards your outlook towards the rest of the world.
Yeah, you're right. And there's a lot of people that I meet that still don't have like acquaintances or friends of different diverse backgrounds. So when you read these stories online or see them in the news, you can't connect them with a face that you know. Right. And I feel like that's what's been helping a lot of people. There's more mixed children I've seen than ever before. You know what I'm saying? So now these white grandpas and grandmas can connect a little brown face with a Tamir Rice, 12 years old, being shot by the police. Like when you don't have that connection and you aren't in a position to receive and to learn and to just be open from what you know and what you have grown up thinking, you put yourself in the position of just not receive anything and just stay in the same place.
Right.
Continue to be sheltered. Shoot.
Sadly, some people will choose that route, you know, 9 times out of 10, unfortunately. It's a sad fact, but again, you know, you can't allow it to be something that drags you down or waste too much time trying to change something that will never change or doesn't want to be changed, you know?
Yeah, you're right. And I think that there's also something to be said about, I don't know. I'm like, what is the racial background of that school that child went to?
Sure. I mean, it's Ohio, so who knows?
That, like, I also really believe in being around like a diverse population.
Right.
Or at least like my own people.
Yeah.
And it sucks that it has to be that way because I should be able to send my child wherever I want to send my child.
Right. But safety wise, those things can't help but cross your mind, right? Like, and that's again the lived experience that people can't understand. You know, like where I live right now, like they have contractors working on the house next to me, and one of the dudes has a Confederate flag on it on his van, right? Oh, and I see that, and I immediately am tense. I'm immediately uncomfortable for the fact that I have somebody like that in such close proximity to my home. You know, and my girl stays here and things like that. Like it makes me uncomfortable just seeing that right there, right? And I think that's what a lot of people miss, you know, when it comes to this conversation. Like, sure, the idea of America is that it's for everybody, but that's just not the reality of everyday life. You know, we have too many instances as people of color that remind us that, you know, we are looked down upon in the society and that it wasn't built for us to prosper, you know, and again, that's a little experience that I'm pointing out, but I can guarantee you no other white person would have that feeling, right? Like of uneasiness. They might be like, oh man, that's like crazy that this dude is still flying it in 2022. But they wouldn't have a feeling of fear come over them by seeing this person, you know, around their house every day, right? And that's kind of the point I'm trying to drive home to people. Yeah, they wouldn't even think twice. Right. It's not even a thought for them. And the fact that you immediately get like nervous, you immediately get like, okay, all right, noted. That doesn't even have to be noted for them. It's just kind of like you live without that. Right. You have the privilege to live without that. Right, exactly. And that's what I think a lot of white people who are fighting so hard against this have to realize. Like there is this lived experience that you can't possibly have, and you just have to understand that, you know, and as hard as it is, you just have to take our word for it to a degree because there are too many factual things to back up these statements as well. Yeah. And again, it doesn't make sense for all these people of color to be telling the same story and live in different places. Right. That doesn't, you all can't be making it up. Right. You know what I'm saying? Right. So it's not only Ohio, it's other parts of America. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, none of these people are connected. Right. You know, the same situations are sprouting up. So that's proof enough that there's a real issue here that hasn't gone away. Because one of the biggest things is people act like we're still in slavery. Slavery was so long ago. Mm-hmm. This and that. Oh, America's the land of the free. You can do whatever you want here. Right. You can to a certain extent. It's nice on paper. Right.
But when you still have these really old, like, ideals just floating around and being passed down through generations, it doesn't go away.
Right.
If anything, it becomes stronger because it's going against everything else happening around them.
Right. They're like taking the stance of like a defensive animal almost, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it makes it even worse. And the scary part is that because of the head start that they had, they own, the properties, the, real estate. They are the people in office. They are the people who are wealthy. They are the people in high positions at important organizations, at colleges, and all these different things, right? And that's also a thing that a lot of, I guess, white people aren't aware of. It's like, you have the people who are at the head of these really powerful institutions in this country, majority of which are, white people, and majority of which are trying to retain a sense of power, and that's the scary thing as well.
Yeah. And I don't understand the big thing about speaking Spanish either, because I'm like, it's, I don't know, it's encouraged to speak multiple languages in Europe.
Right.
Like, then that's y'all's home. That's like,
right.
and some Latinos to a certain extent, like our origins, you meet people from there now, they speak 3-4 languages.
Right.
So I'm like, why wouldn't you want that for our society? Like, why wouldn't you encourage that?
Right.
I don't know, man. It's backwards.
Yeah. I mean, some things you just can't make sense of because it is just so damn backwards. I mean, on some positive stuff, I know we've been talking about a lot of heaviness. I mean, let's talk Bad Bunny, who just seems to be, man, just doing anything he damn well pleases in this world, and is just knocking down door after door after door. Yeah. Now, this week we saw him announced as being the star in Puerto, which is the first Marvel film that will ever be led by a Latino. And it's a spin-off of Spider-Man, and it's just a huge moment from that line right there. Like, again, I'm gonna reread that: the first Latino-led Marvel film, and Bad Bunny is that dude doing that. Is starring. We talked about kind of what we're seeing and changing in Hollywood and stuff like that. And I mean, as much as these other stories we talk about kind of bring us back down to reality, they're also, I think, is this joy when you hear something like this, though, right?
Yeah, I love to hear that. I love to hear that he's such a big star, and most of his songs don't have English. Like him and Rosalia, like, it's refreshing to know that I live in a time where their songs could be #1 on the charts, and half of the people listening don't even understand what they're saying.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
That's so powerful. That's so powerful, because you had for so long, the Latin artists had to make an English-speaking album in order to cross over, right? Mark Anthony, Selena, so like Enrique Iglesias had to become an English artist, so like, that is huge. I feel like that is people talk about it, but still is not talked about as much as it should be. Like his dedication to that.
Yeah, right. It's beautiful. It's a really beautiful thing to see, and I'm excited because I know there's more coming, and there's maybe the next time there's a big film, it's Latino led, and there's different kinds of Latinos, because we're not a monolith. We don't all come from the same culture. There's hundreds of countries. You know what I'm saying? So
absolutely,
I'm just excited to see that exposure grow even more.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful thing. I think, and again, I think a lot of people don't realize this. And I had Alvaro Diaz on the show, and he kind of broke it down like in such a way where he was talking about whenever he saw somebody from Puerto Rico winning, it felt like he was winning. Like he interpreted it as his own win. He felt that same type of joy as if it was happening for him. And like how that's how people in their community felt. And that's why they're so like fanatical about this stuff, because it genuinely does feel that way. When one of us win, it feels like we're all winning. Yeah,
it feels, because you see yourself. You see yourself in the media, on TV. You see, it looks like a mirror. You're like, oh, that person came from my background, and they're doing these big things, and I can do that too. It's possible.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of white people don't understand that, because they always see themselves. So they don't know what it feels like to have that void of not seeing yourself in this world that you're living in.
Right.
It's made for you.
Right.
So when it's not made for you, and that little that little unicorn comes out of nowhere in a Mark Anthony or in a J-Lo or Bad Bunny, you're like, wow, like it can really happen, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I love like, cause I could just feel you basking in the moment. I just think it's such a beautiful thing. I mean, but so let's now talk about something that actually is yours, a celebration that is yours. Let's talk about this book, Café Con Leche, and on it you have the subtitle, I Didn't Know I Was Black. I mean, let's talk about this book. What does all of that mean? Let's unpack it a little bit. Anybody who hasn't seen it kind of floating around.
Yeah. So basically the subtitle gives it all away. I grew up most of my childhood until I was like 17, completely unaware that I was Black. I didn't know. I knew my father was from Colombia. I knew my stepfather was Cuban. But when you ask them, what are you?
Sure.
They proudly say, I'm Cuban, I'm Colombian.
Right.
Shoot, up until maybe like 5 years ago, my dad would kind of get offended when people asked him if he was Black. Because he has a strong accent. And, you know, people are curious and people want to know. So I've been around him multiple situations where people just be like, where are you from? Are you Black? And he's like, no, I'm Colombian.
Right.
So I was just, again, like how we talked about how things get passed down, I was learning from that and taking that into the world. So when people would ask me or people would inquire about my family, I would just say I'm Puerto Rican and Colombian. And I grew up in like, I like to say 3 different worlds because I grew up in dance studios in the suburbs where it was predominantly white or white American or like white Latino. And like 2nd, 3rd generation white Latino. So they're very Americanized, very settled. Yeah. And then in my school, it was entirely Black because I went to schools in Black neighborhoods. And at home, it was fresh. We like to say fresh off the boat Latino. Like we just got here. What's up? What we doing?
Right.
And I noticed in my dance studio world, the white world, they had so many questions about me, my sister. Why am I this color? Why is my sister this color? Is your dad Black? And I'd be like, no. And then he would pick me up from dance and they would be like, but this man is obviously, he's really dark chocolate. So they would be confused and I was there confusing them. Right. So the book just walks through all of those situations. Yeah. And it takes me back to how I felt when people inquired about that. And they kind of looked at me or like even laughed after I replied. I'm like, what are y'all laughing at? What's funny? Yeah. And it even goes into what we have to work on in the Latino community amongst each other. Because I really heavily feel that we go unchecked. We really go unchecked because a lot of the things that are in our culture are so embedded. We're just finding out that it's bad. Yeah. We're just finding out that not all Negros like the nickname Negro. Like, as much as we like to defend, well, everyone has a nickname and it could be Blanco, it could be Flaca, it could be Gordo. Like, it's also, it's not really cool to just give someone a nickname without their consent to just do it. You know what I'm saying? Especially if you don't know that person like that. So, or say things like, when a lot of this happened to my family because my mom's Spaniard descent, Puerto Rican, like we know when our family, we can trace when our family came to Puerto Rico. Yeah. So we're very fair skinned, dark black hair and like narrow noses and very Spaniard. And then both of my siblings have Black fathers, very chocolate. So it was not a second thought on their mind for my family to say, well, okay, we have to straighten this hair because it's too much, or don't put that baby in the sun because it's going to get too dark. And I don't know. I didn't think twice about it growing up because I'm in my bubble, you know?
Yeah, it's normalized.
It's normalized. Yeah. And it wasn't until I got older and started looking around, started reading more, getting more knowledge, and just taking a second to think back. I'm like, that wasn't cool. Yeah. It wasn't cool that this certain family member said, "Ay, you look just like your daddy, pero no quemada." Like you're not burnt. And I remember feeling weird then. I'm like, he's burnt. How do you mean he's burnt? Sure. Yeah. But she doesn't mean he's really dark.
Yeah.
That stuff's not cool. And I feel like if we, like the younger generation, don't go back and be like, all right, let's talk about this.
Right.
Like, what's going on? What happened? Where we get this from? Why are we doing this? We're going to continue it.
Yeah.
So I just go through all of my life and all the things that like made me feel uneasy as a child and as an adult. And honestly, the book was just a whole therapy session for me.
Right, I'm sure.
It was just a whole like looking in the mirror moment on paper.
Yeah. What made you kind of get inspired to write it though? Like, was there something where you were just like, all right, I gotta just get all of this out? Did something happen, or it was kind of over time?
Over time, I started in the pandemic because we had so much time. I'm a professional dancer, so when the pandemic started, my industry just stopped. Yeah, and I had all this time, but I still wanted to create. My wife has basically her own production company. She has her own cameras, lights. And we create our own content. So I was like, I want to really use this time. I'm not busy to just create mad content. I want to make a short film. So I started writing out a short film about a funny memory my mom had when she was little. Yeah. And I wrote like 2 pages of that script. And I was like, when am I going to do this? I need like 5 children. I need so many things. And the world is at a standstill. So how am I going to get this done?
Yeah.
So when I was having that epiphany, how am I going to get this done in the middle of a pandemic? Yeah. I like to call it the international civil rights movement happened because, and I say international because everyone was marching. Yeah. We were marching here. They were marching in New Zealand. They were marching in Europe. It touched the globe. So then the international civil rights movement happened, and I saw the comments, the people, the bickering, the back and forth, everyone just taking off their robes and revealing their racism.
Right. Yeah.
And for like lack of words, and just one word, I was triggered. Triggered. And I felt like all these memories started flowing, especially from the Latino community, because they had the most to say. Right. And maybe it's because that's my community. So that's what was being funneled to me through my Facebook and my Instagram. And I was really bothered about where some of us were in our journey. Yeah. It's so bothered because I'm like, a few years ago, even now from this Ohio story, you told me they don't want us here either. Right. So why are you just nuzzling up to your white savior like this when they don't want you either? Right. So I feel like that's what inspired me to start writing. I started journaling about how all of this was making me feel. I included some of the journal entries in my book. Yeah. And it just kind of flowed from there. And the words just kind of spilled out of me. I couldn't even control it.
That's beautiful. It's funny because I share a similar sentiment. I feel like that whole time period for me was like a great awakening, you know, awakening to my own privilege, awakening to my own experiences from family, things that were normalized that aren't, you know, normal. Yeah. And I think it was a time period where I began to truly like find my voice and my purpose, you know. So it's funny that, man, I think there's a beauty in it. I mean, obviously it was sparked by the tragedy of a Black man being murdered in cold blood. But at the same time, I think, you know, in the grand scheme of things, you're seeing so many other people that are inspired now to use their voice and to advocate, you know, for their community and to try and improve things in any way they can in their own circle, you know, which I think is such a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, I feel like his death sparked an awakening for so many people. Yeah. Almost like it was really for a purpose. Like it gives me chills because I know God sends us here with plans. Yeah. And in the midst of his death, excuse me, not the beginning. Yeah. It's tragic. It's tragic for his family. Like, why is it happening? What is the purpose? And then you just see this big snowball effect. Yeah. And that was the purpose. His legacy is living on through us, through his kids, through all the people carrying and sharing these stories and just buckling down and advocating and protesting and just taking a stand against things that have been wrong for a long time. because of
Right.
this one man.
Yeah.
And then it started making us look back and be like, oh, there's not just one man. He's on a list
Yeah.
of a lot of people
Yep.
that we cared about when it happened, but it didn't get this much light. So now let's go back and let's talk about Trayvon Martin again. Let's talk about Sandra Bland. What's up? What happened there?
Right.
So it's just a big snowball effect.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the most kind of beautiful sort of way, I think, it's funny. I think I got chills as well, just kind of talking about that and thinking about that. And like, just, man, there's definitely something greater at work, from that, just kind of pulling the strings from and man, just awakening us at the right times when needed, and again, you don't ever want a loss of life, but at the same time, you kind of understand there's probably a plan greater, and he became a tool for that plan, which is a beautiful thing, And last thing I want to touch on, which is also, an incredible piece of work that you're doing, is the show on LATV. We have Shades of Beauty, which, man, challenges society's beauty standards. I mean, let's talk about that. What does that mean for you, and why the interest in being a part of a show like this one?
Being a part of Shades of Beauty just overwhelms me, because I really wish I could have been a part of something like that or seen it when I was younger.
Sure.
I wish I could have seen it when I was younger and they were on season 20 instead of season 1 and 2. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's just cool because I'm doing the thing I would have loved to see. And I feel like at first when they brought the idea to me, I was like, Shades of Beauty.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all noticed, but I don't wear makeup like that. I don't get my nails done. I don't do much of my hair. I just try to moisturize my hair. There's nothing going on here. So I didn't really understand that first. And they're like, no, this is what we're talking about. This is what we're doing. I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
I can contribute.
Yeah.
And I actually have something to share. And I can see the way the world around me has shaped my ideas of beauty, or the ideas of beauty of like my family and my friends. And I see the things that we feel like we have to do, or the things that we're striving for. And I noticed the wave of, all right, everyone's kind of chilling. I feel like no one really wanted this body type, to, okay, Kim Kardashian's the blueprint. Okay. Like I see the waves,
Yeah.
So it's just cool that something that I really didn't think I could have any part of at first. I was like, what? It's like actually a really heartwarming thing for me, because I feel like it's necessary for everyone, not even like our up and coming generation watching, but the people that are our age that are kind of like going back and trying to reconstruct everything we've learned and be like, okay, we're taking this out, we're adding this in. Oh, this is good. We can leave that there.
Right.
It's necessary.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up like your initial idea of is like, I'm not that, thing of like the makeup, right? Because it's also what are you taught when you look at the Latin media space, right? It's like,
oh my gosh,
people who are these overly done up European looking women and like well manicured men and all this stuff, right? Like, so it makes you think like that's all that is supposed to be propped up there, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. Or like
that's our training.
The long straight hair. Like,
yes.
We could not cut our hair when we were younger. My dad cried when we cut our a side bang, which is like right here. And it's only this section of your hair. It's not like you still have the rest of your hair. You just have a little bang, a little embellishment. And he boo-hooed because women are supposed to have the long hair. And I'm like, where your hair at? What kind of hair are you supposed to have?
It's all that training that we have, right? That generationally conditions us to think a certain way. I love these conversations that we've been having. I love all the projects that you're a part of. Where can people follow you? They want to check out what you got going on. Give away the social links. Give them the details on the book, all that stuff.
Okay, so you can follow me on Instagram at yoey.apolinario, where you can buy the book. It's available on Amazon, but you can also purchase it directly from my website at yoeyapolinario.com/shop. And y'all, you can put this in the show notes.
Oh yeah, we got you.
Okay, because I got 27 letters in my name, so these poor people out here, I'm like, Apolinario.
We'll put it in the show notes. We'll make sure we got it in the YouTube description. Make it real easy for y'all to click a link and get to where you need to be.
Thank you.
Of course. Yo, it's been great getting to meet you and have you on the show. And definitely, you know, when I'm out in LA, hopefully we can link up on something, do some more content. I'd love to have you back on at some point.
Hit me up when you out here.
Got you. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Man, big shout out to my guest this week, Yoey Apolinario, for hopping on today's show. Always good to have the family on. Again, Café Con Leche, her book. Make sure you go check that out. And with that said, man, let's end the show on some positivity in the form of a positive quote. Now, this week's quote comes to us from Lauren Geisberg, and the quote is, "Accept what it is, let go of what was, and have faith in what will be." And man, this one speaks to my soul. I am a motivated person. I am a driven person. I have so many plans for my life. But the reality is you are not in control of every single aspect of it. You can only take your goals and your ideas and your dreams but so far, and then you have to allow the universe to do what it does. And the only way to find peace in that is to allow yourself to just be. Just be with whatever ends up happening. I love this. Let go of what was. Let go of the past, man. Accept what is. Accept how things are right now. And just, man, maintain that faith that it will all work out the way it's supposed to and in a positive way at the end of the day. Keep that faith. Now, with that said, thank y'all so much for tuning into another episode. I'll be back next week with a brand new one to break it all down. Until then, be safe, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.